Yeah, you guys can continue.
Okay, so first we'll start with an announcement. So you probably heard, all of you heard about the conflict in Ukraine. And I am Russian, so for me this is also quite heartbreaking to see the news when my country invades neighbors. And I'm also partly Ukrainian, so that's why for me last week was very difficult to process and to see what's going on in the world. And I just wish I would wake up and nothing of that happened. Yeah, and I imagine that many of you are also going through this, and especially people in Ukraine. So what I feel is nothing compared to what they have to deal with right now. So they have to defend the country. I saw pictures on LinkedIn with data engineers holding a rifle, and I wish this never happened. But yeah, this is unfortunately the world we live in. That's why I know for many of us it's difficult to take the course right now, and probably our mind is somewhere else. That's why we decided to for the project, because to get a certificate you need to complete a project, and for some of you maybe it's very difficult to work on a project right now, especially if you're now in Ukraine. So that's why we decided to have sort of two cohorts in a way. So people who can work right now will keep on working like planned. So we will have project like planned, but then we will have another project for those who need to catch up in a month or maybe more, depending on how it goes. Just in case for somebody who cannot work on things right now, so you have a chance to catch up later. And also I wanted to say a few words that you probably know what happens in the news, and Ukraine needs your support. So consider donating to Ukraine to help Ukrainian army. I included a few links in the description. You can donate. So these links, I trust these links. My Ukrainian friends gave these links to me, so I trust these links. And also I want to send a message to troops that are deployed right now in Ukraine, to Russian troops. Let me do it. So those who do not understand Russian, yeah, maybe you can look it up. But yeah, I hope this madness ends soon and we go back to normal life. Of course, yeah, it will be very difficult, and yeah, so I don't know what to say.
Our, I can just say our hearts and prayer goes out to each and every Ukrainian out there. And I just hope things get better soon and we can move ahead of it from this.
Yeah, so
Same for me as well. Yesterday I attended the protest at Berlin. At Brandenburg Tor in Berlin. There were so many people there standing in solidarity. So yeah, a lot of us across different cultures do care about this, and definitely we are in support with you. So if there's anything we can do for you, just let us know about it.
yeah, thanks. This is a very emotional topic, so I didn't know if I want to bring this up on this stream or not. Probably it's better to bring this up and talk about that. But yeah, it will be probably difficult now to talk about the course and questions. But I guess we should start, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me share my screen. So, by the way, apart from this announcement, do we have any other announcements?
Yes, regarding the course, week 6 is completed and it's out. So you would see all the videos from Kafka out there. I'm working on the homework. It's almost done. I will update the README with the links to the videos and also to the homework. If you have already started, you can definitely go to the playlist and look for week 6, and everything should be ordered with numbers. So it comes one after the other. So it should be easy for you. But in case you find any issues, please do wait for the README to get updated. I think I will do it after the call. Otherwise, feel free to ping on Slack, and I will share the links there also.
Okay, thanks. So back to questions. Yeah, by the way, regarding week 5, I already made an announcement in Slack. So the materials that you need for finishing the homeworks are there. And I also saw that some people, also something I wanted to cover is like, now you have a Spark cluster, how do, not like you have a Spark master running locally, or maybe you have a Spark cluster, how do you connect to Google Cloud Storage? And there is already an answer in Slack. So maybe some of you who wants to help a little bit, maybe you can write a similar thing of how do you actually set up a Spark cluster on Google Cloud Platform. I think I saw some of you already mention something like this, and just link to week 5. So for those who want to learn more about that. But I think the core things that I wanted to cover in week 5 are already there, except a couple of videos about RDD that are still work in progress. And that is probably, as far as introduction to Spark goes, that should be sufficient. Okay, so let's start with questions. So any advice or story about your friends shifted from DBA to data engineer? Because I will shift my career after 5 years of working as DBA to data engineer. Ankush, do you know anyone who did a shift like that?
Not really. No, I didn't. I don't know anyone like that. Do you?
I'm thinking now, so people who shifted to data engineering, they are mostly software engineers. So Java developers, for example, or I know a Python developer who became a data engineer. I know a PHP developer who became a data engineer. So mostly they come from software engineering. I know for DBAs, usually I see what DBAs do. They become platform engineers or DevOps engineers, or exactly with more focus on ops part rather than the engineering part. So perhaps maybe for you this will be a more natural thing, more natural transition. So maybe you first get into infra side of these things and then go to data engineering. Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, and as I always said, that data engineering is a very broad term or job profile. So you can have data ops in it, which is basically would be a good fit for a DBA. Then you have analytics, or more focused towards analysis, and there you can write SQL scripts. So if you as a DBA are already doing SQL, then this shift would also be pretty natural for you with respect to at least working with SQL and writing like pipelines in SQL. And then once you get more comfortable with it, then start learning more Python. And I think from there, you can just pick up different, more technologies which you think are appropriate for you or are interesting for you.
Okay, yeah. Any project suggestions for Spark? Do you know? Do you have any suggestions, Ankush?
I think Spark is. I would pick up a big data set for a project with Spark, just to see how you can scale and how you can basically work with 100 nodes in one go, and most probably spend all your credits, but still you can like scale massively with Spark. So if you choose any project, I do not have any suggestion directly for a project, but I would suggest you to go for at least minimum 200, 300, maybe even 1 terabyte of data. And then you will see the power of Spark basically shining. And you can actually do the comparison between this and maybe a normal script, which does it sequentially. You will actually see the power of something which is distributed and can handle these kind of features out there.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah, that's a good thing to try the scale, but I'm not sure you can actually have the scale, the scale you would have at work in your project environment. That would be pretty difficult, I think. So maybe you can also start small. Like small, I don't mean like Titanic dataset or Iris dataset. So something that is preferably larger than 1 kilobyte, at least, I don't know, a couple of gigs, right? And then play with that. So the taxi dataset we have, I don't think it's, I think it's still quite small for Spark. So you need something bigger to actually feel it, to see that you need to tune like a garbage collector and all these things. But I do have a suggestion. So it will not be close to what you will need to deal with at work, but look for at-click datasets. So there is a good, yeah, so this, so in ad tech, in advertisement, there is usually a lot of data. So this, for example, on Kaggle, there were a couple of click-through rate prediction competitions with pretty large data sets. So I don't know if this one is actually large. Yeah, it's not that large, so there are larger ones. And you can look for data sets from Criteo or Criteo, I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, so for example, this one, 1 terabyte click logs, then there are similar ones. So yeah, look for ad tech data sets, and you will find a lot of relatively big data sets, and they are also not that difficult to understand. So there is some information about the click, like about the device from which the click comes, so you can roughly understand what's happening there. Another data set that is probably, I don't know, it could be challenging, but it's called Common Crawl. So this is basically a copy of the internet. So they crawl the internet and they save everything to S3. So yeah, get started. So even if you just take, yeah, so there's, yeah, even if you just take a couple of parts of this dataset, let's say for January, it will be enough to play with this data. Now, but it's difficult because it contains natural text. It contains a lot of pornography because this is a copy of the internet. So you will need to be very careful with how exactly you process this, because it's internet as it is, just a copy of this. So this is a good data set also to play with. Not necessarily for Spark, but in general, if you want to try processing large amounts of data. Yeah, but also there were a good list of suggestions. There was a good list of suggestions in Slack. Check it out. You'll probably find good data sets. Another maybe complex example, there's graph data sets. So there is this Snap Stanford. Yeah, you can find good big graphs here that are also could be quite interesting to process, especially in Spark, because in Spark there is Spark graphs. I don't remember how this called. Yeah, this graphics thing. I think it works only for Scala, though. I don't know if it works for Python. But yeah, if you want to experiment with this library, I haven't found anything better for processing graphs than this library. Yeah, so also could be a nice project. Okay, now I'll go back. Okay, Sejal, maybe you want to add anything about projects with Spark?
Nothing from what you already said. I think there's also Spark ML, right?
As a data scientist, I would not recommend using it.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe for something quick. Yeah, do we have enough time to? I mean, it's short. It's just. I think the reason it exists is just for marketing, to say, hey, we have this, and I don't think it's people actually put enough effort.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
So it's not powerful enough.
Yeah, so and models there from Spark ML, they don't really work well. So what we usually do in data science is we use Spark for preparing the data set, and then we get a big machine, beefy machine, and then we just load the data and use a simple Python script for training the model. So we still use Spark, but just we then materialize the data that we prepared with Spark, save it to S3, and then the script would load the data and train a model on the prepared data set.
And hopefully by that time, the data is already less in size. You just use the important information.
Yeah, it's already prepared, so it's in Parquet, for example, then it's fast to download, to load.
Do you also use Spark for training?
No. For not for training. So this is how we use data for preparing data, and then we use a Python script that does not have Spark. And then for applying the model, we do use Spark usually. So we just do map partition. So there is an example that I still need to finish. So this is the last video. So I still have to process 2 videos. One about RDDs, that map, filter, and reduce. And then the other one is about map partition. So in map partition, so this is a quite useful operation, and I use it quite often for applying machine learning models. So give me some time, and I will finish these videos, and you will be able to see them.
Nice. I think it'll be helpful for me as well.
I can give you a raw and unedited version. It's very bad because I get interrupted or I forget what to say, and then there is a lot of, it needs editing. But anyways. So no question, that was a very powerful message. Thank you for your support. So I am going to click on this. So in some resources, there is a collect method applied after a query on PySpark. Could you please explain in simple words what is the purpose of this method? So the purpose of this method is, let's say you have well, I'm going to say RDD, but I haven't released videos about RDD, so I'll try to. So RDD is a distributed data set. So let's say you have a usual Python list, but then this is the same, but this is not a usual Python list, but this is a list that distributed across many machines. Or data frame. So data frame is also sort of a distributed collection that we have that consists of many partitions. And then you do some operations on this data frame or on this RDD, and then you invoke this collect to get everything that this data frame or this RDD contains into a in-memory object. So you kind of move the thing you have, a distributed collection, and you turn this into a collection that you have in your Python process.
Driver node.
Driver node. Thank you, Ankush. Yeah, maybe that was a long explanation. Maybe you have a shorter one, Ankush?
If you want to count all the elements, you need to put it into one node to count it, right? So that's where you will use collect. But do remember, if you use collect on large data sets, you will run out of memory also. So be careful of using what you're doing. It's really helpful if you want to collect and then write to one file, then something like that can be helpful. But be careful while using it.
Yeah, so this is a transformation. So when I was talking about actions and transformations, so most of the operations in Spark are transformations, but some of them are actions. And as example of actions, I talked about show, I talked about take, and I talked about, I think, head, and I also talked about write. But also collect is also an action. So it triggers the entire execution, but then instead of saving it somewhere, you get it as an object in your process. How did you say driver? What?
Driver node.
Driver node, exactly. Okay, I'm still confused about when use the data frame or use the Spark SQL. Any advice or some simple case? Maybe Ankush, you want to jump in?
So they are pretty similar, but Spark SQL does not offer everything. So there are some limitations when it comes to Spark SQL. And in those cases, you might want to go towards the more, let's say, raw level of data, basically data frame or RDD. But if you are more comfortable with SQL, then start with SQL and start using Spark SQL, and most probably quite a few of your cases would be covered there. And if you're coming from data science background, then data frame might fit more naturally to you. So it can also be a choice you can make. But for simple use cases, Spark SQL works fine. But maybe it doesn't work for more complicated or more optimized jobs.
And the way I use it often is I try to have best of both worlds. So for some things where writing a SQL query is faster, so for example, if I need to do join or group by, in simple cases, I would just go with SQL. But then if I need to use a UDF or something like this, then I would do some initial preprocessing with SQL, then a SQL execution of SQL returns another data frame, right? And then you can execute some things on that data frame as well. So you can combine them. Anything else? I don't know if it made it clearer or not. I hope it was helpful. Okay, what is a driver node in Spark? Is it a master node or some other node that is dedicated for in-memory processing?
Master node.
Master node?
Yes.
But not necessarily, right? So master is something that coordinates the execution. But then, so let's say if I do Spark submit from my computer, or I open Jupyter on my computer and connect to a master, then the driver node becomes the thing from which I do Spark submit, right?
I think that's where the Spark context lies. So basically, if you are doing it in memory, then it will be your machine, right? That the Spark context would start, and then you will connect to different workers, give your graph to them, give your data to them, and then they will start executing, right?
So I want to try to find. Oops, not the one I wanted to open. Okay. So I wanted to. No, come on. So my touchpad is too sensitive, I guess. So I think this anatomy of a Spark cluster. Okay, this is a good one. So this thing, so laptop, this is the driver node or whatever you use. Maybe this, if you submit your job from Airflow, then whenever you invoke this Spark submit or you connect to Spark to master, as Ankush said, whenever this Spark context lives, right? So let's say if it lives in my Jupyter notebook on my laptop, then my laptop is the driver. And then master is the thing that coordinates execution of a job. So it watches which executors are available, and if one of the executors dies, if it reassigns. So it has the coordinating role. And then you can also watch the progress of the jobs from the master node. Right?
So you are right. Yeah, I just also looked it out. So basically, it can run on worker or master node. So basically, it's not always not running on master node, but it makes more sense to run it on master node, right? Because you'd want your Spark context to be alive throughout the process.
So when you do Spark submit, you can say where the process should live, right? So do you want to keep it on the master node or you want to keep it somewhere else, right?
Yeah. So you can specify with the config spark.driver.host, and that might provide the driver would run on this particular host machine.
Okay. And by default, I think this is the laptop or the computer from which you execute, from which you connect to Spark master. But then you can specify it. You can override this and you can say that it should live somewhere else, right?
Yeah. That's what I see from the documentation I'm reading right now.
Okay. Should I mark it as resolved, Sejal?
Sejal?
Any comments?
Yeah, sure. I'm not much of a Spark expert, so I don't really have much to say yet.
So maybe you can answer the next question. So it's not a silly question, but is there a good resource website to learn about the logistics of implementing a pipeline for someone, as in a good server to use, cost, etc.?
Pipeline for someone. For someone?
Maybe if you're a data engineer freelancer, then somebody comes to you with a pile of money, says, hey, implement a pipeline for me. So how would you approach that?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, you definitely would start with gathering the requirements, based on how automated a solution you want to make, how much you want to invest, and if it is a really simple and straightforward task. I'm just giving an example here for data ingestion. You can have your own custom pipelines built in Airflow, or you could just use something like Fivetran, which has automated ETL solutions where you just provide the input and output and integrate it with your targets such as Snowflake, and you don't really, with minimal or standardized level of ETL, it'll do the job. And by just providing the schema and just playing around with SQL. But for more custom, ingestion pipelines, you may need to use Airflow, for example, to add some additional steps to pre-processing. So it really depends upon the use case. So yeah, I don't know, like what would you say, or Alexei and Ankush?
So what I basically do is, if you have some pipeline in mind, right? Like you already know what kind of steps you have. Then Google provides a very nice calculator. Actually, this is called Google Cloud Pricing Calculator. So if you just Google that, you should be able to find it. I will also put that in the chat on YouTube. So in this, you can basically put what all resources you want, what all, yeah, I think the second one, maybe. Exactly. So here you can put what kind of compute engines you want. If you go up, Alexa, then maybe if you go on the right, there should be more. I think there should be data flow also, maybe GCP also. So BigQuery, for example, you have cloud storage, you have BigQuery, you have Dataprog, you have data flow. So now you know what kind of tools you want to use, right? So once you know that, you can basically do this on demand or flat rate, and then you can have a very good estimation of your price. Obviously, you should overprice always. So basically to overestimate, and then maybe cut the resources based upon that. And this can also help you to decide, maybe you don't want to deploy your own Kafka cluster. You just want to use PubSub because PubSub is way much cheaper for your use case. So in all these cases, you can basically do these kind of estimations on the fly. But it gets tricky because obviously you cannot tell everything, but you can make some sort of comparison. And I think similar ones are also offered for AWS.
Maybe not
I am
as
not 100% sure
convenient
about that.
as this one. So I think for AWS, you don't have everything, at least not to my knowledge. You don't have everything in one place. So for example, if you want to calculate pricing for Lambda, then there is a separate page just for Lambda. Maybe there is something now that is convenient as this one, but I'm not aware of that.
So I found, just Googling here because I'm more on GCP. So there is this netapp.com AWS calculator. Yeah, that calculator maybe.
This is like a third-party thing, right?
Yeah, I think it's a third-party thing. I'm not 100% sure if what AWS has to offer. So then you can over here also kind of estimate your cost somehow by doing the same thing as you did in Google Cloud. But Google Cloud one is just, it's just way much better.
You may also want to think that if you, I mean, it's always a good option to begin with, if you're building it for someone, then to begin with a cloud-based solution, because most of them are managed services. But in case if they want to, out of, let's say, security reasons, if they want to have their own cluster and manage their own stuff, if they already have possibly a DevOps team in future, you can also consider Kubernetes cluster and deploy a self-hosted solution there with an open source stack. So yeah, these are a lot of trade-offs that you need to make in order to begin with.
So AWS does have one.
Mm.
We'll post it again in Slack. Sorry, in YouTube. So that's calculator.aws.
Oops, I'm not in that video anymore. Are you sure you posted?
I did post.
I think, yeah, there is this spam filter from YouTube. It just doesn't. Maybe can you send it to me through Zoom and I will add this.
Yeah. Sorry. There you go.
So I'll do it. Now hopefully it should be visible. Yeah, and I wanted to show this link. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sklink. Yeah, but this is from a guest of one of the Data Talks Club podcasts. So the podcast is this Data Ops episode, and yeah, so he collected quite a lot of resources that are related to data engineering, like batch processing, stream processing, and so on. Yeah, so maybe this is something that you probably will find something useful there. So let me send it here as well.
The last link I saw there was transitioning to Scala. See, you cannot live without Scala. Alexei, you need to learn it now.
I did have a pleasure of having to use Scala for too long.
Too long, okay.
Like it was half a year or something like this.
Okay.
So my Java brain doesn't. Sorry?
Sorry, but below that line, just two links below, there is also moving a team from Scala to Golang. So basically, you first learn Scala and then you learn Golang.
Yeah, I think there was maybe this is actually the link that thing. So there was a article maybe here that about this starship operator, right? And if you come across this thing in code and then you try to Google this, and then this is what you get. And then this is a funny article because then they figured out that this is a starship operator from some functional programming library, the Scala Z, or I think there is a bunch of them, right?
Cats, Scala Z, yeah.
Cats, yeah. This Scala Z, yeah, here it is. Yeah, that's a funny article. I think, with Scala you have to set some standards and then make sure that people do not get too carried away too much.
Creative.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my rule is like learn Python unless unless you're joining a company like Spotify that requires Scala.
True. And even if you start with Scala, don't start with all the functional libraries and stuff. Like, try to keep it simple in the beginning.
Okay, how important are certificates? Am I unable to complete the course? I'm unable to complete the course. Do you work pressure? Can I do it on my own pace? Yeah, they are not important. I hire people and I have never asked anyone to show me their certificates because I don't care. Right? So usually you have an interview, and if you see that this person you're interviewing knows something, then they know something, right? And you don't care if they have certificates or not. But I wouldn't say it's important. But maybe it's also nice to have things like it gives you some sort of achievement, but I don't think you should stress too much about that and just take the course at your own pace. And the most important thing here is learning, not whether you get a certificate at the end or not.
I would like to add to that. That's whatever Alexa says, absolutely correct. It's more about learning. It's not about certificate. But in case you are a fresher and you are starting your first job, then I don't know if it would be helpful, but it might be helpful. So think of it like this. And if you get a certificate, put it on LinkedIn so that people who review your profile can actually see that.
And, it will also serve as an advertisement for our course, right? So because they will see, okay, data engineering Zoomcamp, what it is. So then they will click on this thing and they will find this amazing course, and they will know that the course is amazing, and they will immediately trust that you learned something, and they will maybe hire you.
That was not the direction I was going into, but yeah, why not?
Okay. Any comments about that?
Hey, where did I
Thank
go?
you. Yeah, you already got your compliments last week, you and Victoria, Ankush. So yeah, thanks, Alvaro. Nice save, by the way, because Alexi and I, especially, okay, not Alexi. I'm not sure about Alexi, but I was feeling quite insecure that Ankush and Victoria are winning the beauty contest here. So yeah, thanks for making us feel great about this. Alexi, do you want to add something? Yeah.
So from my research, Spark can do what dbt can do, can use both Spark and dbt. ETLT, I don't know what ETLT is, or what are the use cases where one is more preferable than the other. Maybe I can summarize, because this is something we discussed in Slack recently. So I would say, if you can write something in SQL and you already have things in your data warehouse and you're not afraid of costs, because I think this is what Ankush wants to mention. He will probably say about that more. But yeah, if you can do this, cost, yes. But if you can do it with SQL and with a data warehouse or something like Hive or Presto, something managed like Athena in AWS, so that you don't need to worry about having this Spark cluster and then making sure it needs maintenance, or you can use this managed Spark cluster from AWS or something like that. Yeah, because it gives you, like, you just write a SQL query, then you put this SQL query to your Airflow or dbt, and then it just runs the things. Yeah, so, but then sometimes you need things that are very difficult to express with SQL. Sometimes you need more control over things, then you go with Spark. And maybe, Ankush, you can add a few words about cost and then about cases.
Sometimes you just want to test your unit test your code, so you write that in Spark then. I think dbt is completely different from Spark. It's not a one-to-one comparison. dbt is something like sequential SQL queries, and it has many features which Spark would not offer out of the box. So like you can write, let's say, 20 steps in dbt, and it's understandable using that graph, dbt graph, dbt cloud. And I think if you do the same thing in in Spark, it would get hard to debug over time. So do think about your use case. I think having a one-to-one comparison is not fair for either dbt or Spark in this case.
But at the end, both are used for batch processing, right? So there are some similarities.
I think it also depends upon the larger use case. dbt is particularly a tool used by analytics engineers, and more from the standpoint of creating the data marts or transformations for that could be that could generate views for your dashboards, analytical dashboards. And Spark is more like multi-purpose technology, can be used in ML as well for distributed processing. Mainly, it's its core value is into distributed processing. So yeah, just like Ankush said, it's not really comparable as such.
And you have this flexibility of using whatever you want from Python or from Java or whatever environment you use, which you do not have with dbt. So in dbt, you can only use SQL, right? So maybe you can, I don't know, in a BigQuery you can have some user-defined functions, right? But they're pretty limited and hard to test, and then it will turn out a nightmare at the end, right?
Absolutely. So I think maybe we can also see it something like this. If you are going to, let's first say, if your company is using something like dbt and Airflow, go with that solution. If your company is more only focused on SQL and only on Spark, and you are very familiar with Spark, then feel free to explore more Spark SQL and that kind of area. It will depend upon the maturity of the team and the company also, basically what you are doing at that moment.
For a use case when you don't yet have a Spark cluster, maybe it's a good idea to try to avoid having to maintain a Spark cluster. And if you can express things with SQL and use serverless things like BigQuery or Athena or something like this, where your team, you do not have to manage a Spark cluster or Yarn or whatever. Yeah, I think it's better in the beginning. But then eventually you will probably need to look into this direction and get a Spark cluster. And then, yeah, as Ankush said, depends on maturity. Probably at the beginning you don't want to deal with all that.
Yeah, and also it also depends upon what are your clients, right? So if you have more analytical engineers in your company who are not familiar with Python and not familiar with Spark, then you also don't want to debug each and every use case they are having or each and every issue they are having. So maybe having a DBT which can run SQL is a way much better maintenance-wise for you. So you might also want to compare or have a comparison with that respect. And obviously cost.
A compilation of useful and interesting leaks discussed in Slack and used personally would be insanely helpful. So I'm wondering what we can do. Maybe we can just start a Google document and then, yeah, if you can help us actually come up with this list, that would be really helpful. And then maybe we can then turn this Google document into a wiki page on GitHub or something like this. I guess we can just start a Google document and then see if it gets any traction, if people start putting links there. And if it happens, then yeah, you will have it. Anything to add? Okay, so there is a link that really helped Rick to understand DBT and Airflow integration. Let's take a look. I can't believe I...
Maybe this should be the first link to our Google Docs.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, we should have our opening next time for the data engineering Zoomcamp with this. Like, it may look intense, but you can definitely do it.
Okay. When there is data shuffling, is it possible that the same key spills into another partition because of partition size limit? So another shuffle is required. Ankush, do you know that? You're shaking your head means it's not possible?
No. Okay, it depends upon the operation you are doing. But if you do an operation in which all your keys or all your key value pair has to be at the same node, then that will happen on the same node and you will run out of memory. Then either you will need to upgrade your machines to have high memory, or you will need to find out your skewed keys and then basically unskew them. So that would be the case. But let's assume you are doing something like a count or something like let's say an average. Maybe an average is, yeah, an average also will work. So if you do an average, for example, then you can have intermediate nodes which will do some pre-calculation and give only the pre-calculation ahead to the other nodes. And in those cases, you can imagine that the shuffling is not happening only on one node. So basically, not all the data is getting there in one node and then something is happening. So there are pre-steps which are happening. In those cases, you might still be able to run with limited memory. But if you do something like a join or something, then you will need to think about your data skew and your data, maybe your memory in your machine.
And data skew, I think, Ankush, you sent me a link about how to deal with this data skew, right? So I think this article was about joins. Yeah, maybe you can share later this link, and I think this is quite useful just to understand how how joins work in Spark, maybe in addition to what I already explained, because I only scratched the surface. Yeah, that link was quite good. Maybe I'll try to find it, but yeah, maybe you can just post it. Perhaps
I will also have to look for it, but I think it should be in the Slack
in our
resources,
chat,
right?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be in our chat.
Okay, what is the difference between resource manager and master? Somebody wants to take this?
You are the Spark expert.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot. Okay, so a resource manager, let's say we have this yarn thing, but probably now, yeah, it tells me about this JavaScript thing. Actually, I wanted yarn Hadoop. This yarn is yet another resource negotiator. So maybe, do I have? So I do not have that video that I wanted to show you. So remember this picture? Let me try to find it. This picture on which we had a driver, then we had a master, and then we had executors. So what this resource manager does, and you can also think about Kubernetes, because Kubernetes also does that. So what it's doing, it's allocating resources. So you submit a Spark job and you say, for this Spark job, I need, I don't know, executors with this amount of memory, with this amount of CPU, and I need 10 of them, right? So you submit this to your master, and then they communicate with the resource manager, and the resource manager provisions these executors. So let me try to find it. So before, mostly Yarn was used for that. Then there is a thing called Mesos, I think, that works with Spark. And lately, I think Kubernetes is usually used for that. Oops. What is happening with my touchpad?
So basically, it's like So let's assume you say, I want 4 worker nodes. And this resource manager would be responsible for spinning up these 4 worker nodes.
Yeah. So you have a bunch of machines, right? And then it will look at, okay, I have these machines, and let me allocate a executor node there, right? A worker node there. So this is what Yarn will do. And I think when you, with Spark running on Yarn, so your master also runs on Yarn. So then you kind of, master is kind of doing both things, right? So it, at the same time, is a master, I think, to which you send requests, and then it's closely connected to this resource manager, because this is the thing that provisions resources, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember days when I would Google Yarn, and I would find things about Hadoop. But now, yeah, it's...
You still find things about Hadoop, yeah.
But where?
No?
Like, it's like almost at the end. And because I guess I clicked on it a couple of times.
Yeah, I think the search is curated per user. So if you're a techie, then you would get technical, definitions with respect to
yeah,
that
but this is a JavaScript package manager, which is more popular than you see. So Yarn is software packaging system. So you don't get the Hadoop Yarn, but you get. Oh, they have a nice logo. Is it a kitten? Oh, what is that?
Cute.
Then I still don't know what is the difference between NPM and Yarn. But yeah, maybe this is a topic for a different discussion. I think these days Kubernetes gets more and more popular for this, right? I think so at ToELX we have Yarn as well, but most of our workloads now run on Spark and Kubernetes.
Yeah. Kubernetes
Same way you, Ankush?
Yeah. So we use Flink, but we are also running it on Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
Kubernetes as a resource manager is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember attending a talk like 3-4 years ago on Berlin Buzzwords. It was about running Spark on Kubernetes, and it was so difficult. Like there was so many details. Like they ran into so many problems. then they managed to run it at the end, and I thought, okay, it's not worth it. I can just go to AWS, click on this AWS, how it's called, EMR, click on this, and then I'll have a Yarn cluster without worrying about all that. But now, yeah, Kubernetes becomes more and more popular.
Yeah, because everybody's using Kubernetes. Who wants to spend more hardware on running Spark jobs now? Seriously.
Yeah, and you don't want to have, like, because you already have Kubernetes, you don't want to have another resource manager nearby.
Exactly.
And yeah, with Yarn, I think you also usually install the whole Hadoop thing, like you will need HDFS there, and like all the stuff that you don't typically use these days. You keep your data in a cloud storage, so you don't need all this HDFS kind of stuff. I don't know, do you still use HDFS, Ankush? No? Sujal?
No.
There was only one company I used it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too, and that was a long time ago.
Exactly.
I mean, ever since AWS and S3 has come up, I think HDFS is more or less forgotten.
I think today there was a talk from Indeed. It's a company for job search. So they have on-premise Hadoop cluster, and they run Spark on that. But I think this becomes more and more rare these days. So I think Criteo, the company we talked about that has this huge data set, they, I think at some point were bragging that they have the largest Hadoop cluster in Europe. But I thought, okay, like, is it really a good thing or not?
Must be like, I don't know, an old enterprise company.
Legacy.
Yeah, probably. But it was a couple of years ago.
I think SoundCloud also has that. I don't know, I've heard that.
Okay. For the project, how long will be the time frame to complete it? So right now what we have in mind is 2 weeks. But yeah, depending on how it goes, this is the first time we run this course, and we'll just see how much time it takes for you. So we don't want you to spend more than 2 weeks on that. So we want to have something small. Yeah, so don't get too ambitious, please. Like, don't process all command crawl data for your project. Yeah, ideally 2 weeks, but let's see. Anything to add? Do you provide standard solution for the final project like you're doing for weekly homeworks? No, I don't think so.
No, right? No.
Well, some of these projects that you will work on will become standard examples for the future generations. So for you, you have the honors of being the first one and making it easier for the future generations. Given that we still haven't decided, right, if we want to do it one more time, but if we decide that yeah, it will be simpler for them.
Even if we don't decide to do that, videos are out there. So
yeah, of course. I've been really enjoying learning throughout this course, and I would like to continue after. Would you suggest formal education or just self-learning? Anyone?
Serial?
I mean, again, my answer would be opinionated here, but I have generally, like, learned not via formal education, but but just by trying different projects out, trying open source projects out from GitHub, or trying to see what little things you can automate at work even. Like if you're a data analyst or a data scientist and you can take on some automation, just opportunities wherever you see to, engineer some pipelines, and yeah, and then just proceed from there and see how you can help your current use cases out in the company, or in self-learning as well, just trying things out on your own, based on whatever tech stack, for example, you want to learn, or a particular area, like a core area that you want to learn. For example, I don't know, recommendations engine, or data engineering pipelines within the recommendations domain, or search engine, and so on and so forth. So just some thoughts from the top of my head, but maybe Ankush and Alexi, you can add.
From what I can say is basically it depends upon your end goal. With the formal education, you get the opportunity to meet people, you get the opportunity to learn from PhDs or from professors who are really proficient in their domain. You can learn the theory behind the practical. So basically, right now we are more focused upon, let's say, a particular technology. And even if you're talking about theory, we are talking about that theory of that technology. We are not going deep into the theory of computers and maths behind it. Or for example, distributed system would have mathematics all behind it before actually even starting. So if you want to learn that things, then you have to go for a formal education, and that too from a good university. If your aim is to socialize, to get or to do a PhD or to do a master's afterwards, then formal education is also the right way because you build relationships there. But if your aim is to learn, especially learn in the domain that you want to work on specific technologies or become a data engineer, let's say, then there is nothing better than self-taught. You will never learn the same things you will use in work in formal education anyways. So in formal educations, the things you will learn is a bit different than what you will learn if you do self-learning, basically, and focus it upon a particular subject.
And I remember my education, my master's. Yeah, I don't think most of the things I learned were useful. I mean, directly applicable at work. So they were useful. So for example, we studied database internals. Like we actually needed to implement a database. That was fun. I'm not sure how useful that was for my work. And it's also 2 years, right? Maybe after half a year, you realize that data engineering is not for you. So what do you do then, right? With self-learning, it's kind of safer, right? So you spend, you can just, okay, this is not for me. Like, let me try something else. But if you're halfway through your master's, then you have this, okay, should I finish it? Should I not finish it? It's just 1 year, but then yeah, it becomes difficult, right? And then this thing called master thesis, I remember how much troubles I had with this. Yeah. So actually wanted to do a PhD. So before doing masters, I thought, okay, I'll do masters and then I'll do PhD. And then master thesis, when doing master thesis, I realized that I hate writing papers. And this is what basically PhD students do all the time. So yeah, it was fun, but not something super useful for work.
Yeah, like
And then data
now
engineering. Yeah, sorry. Oops.
Sorry.
Everything is good?
No, just drop the bottle. And now you are thanking that master is only for 2 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, then you
And
don't
then,
have to
yeah,
read paper.
in Germany it can take longer easily.
Of course.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think, yeah, it's time to finish. Maybe we can take the last one, right? Any advice on how I could apply what I learned at the course? We will have a 3-week project at the end of the course. Could you suggest more project ideas? Anyone? I think just take a look at the datasets, at the thread with datasets we had in Slack, and I'm pretty sure you will find something interesting there. Yeah, and just go from there. Or, yeah, maybe think, yeah, I would go from a dataset. So first, I would find a dataset and then try to think what exactly can I do with this dataset. And yeah, this one is quick. The YouTube playlist will be still available. Anyone wants to add?
I can say that if you finish one project where you are basically using more batch processing, then maybe the next project can be more real-time processing. Or similarly, if you're doing less airflow, then more airflow. So something like that. So try to explore different areas also to broaden your knowledge.
Tejal?
Nothing else to add from my end. Basically, just what you guys said. I think it really, again, like, it really depends on the need of the hour, like situation, based on what you feel like learning, what you think is important for you to learn in order to implement with respect to what you're currently working on. So, yeah, I think you'll figure it out. I'm sorry, I don't have anything specific to say.
Okay, maybe this one I can quickly answer this. Will the certificate be issued individually right after the project being peer-reviewed, or it will be issued on a single day? It will be issued on a single day because this process is quite manual. Of course, I will not have to type your name for every certificate and then save it. It's semi-automated, but I will still need to come up with a CSV file with all the names, emails, and so on. Then, yeah, even before that, I will need to come up with a design. I will need to come up with the design. Then I have a script that we can just run and then upload this to actually have a website certificate, this certificate data docs club, like that. Yeah, so things will be published here. And you can see that it's AWS S3 buckets are used for that. So your certificate will be there, and there is a script for creating the certificate. But yeah, it will not be automatic. There is still some manual work. That's why it will be on a single day after a specific deadline. And a specific deadline in this case means that when we have the CSV file, when we have a design for the certificate, and when we hit the enter in a command line.
I also just wanted to add to the previous question because I just thought of something. So I think in addition to what you're learning in this course, maybe you could also try on your own learning some standard software engineering skills that can be applied in data engineering as well, such as the CI/CD, orchestrating CI/CD pipelines, workflows, GitOps, automated test cases, especially unit tests, maybe with PyTest. So you can use PyTest in combination with Airflow. Make it more production friendly, your code basically, because we haven't really covered that. I'm not sure if we would be covering these modules like in the next iterations. If we find the time, then definitely we would add it as bonus lectures. But yeah, this is also something you can try out.
Okay, that would be it, I guess. So, yeah, peace, everyone. Goodbye.
All right. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.